You're listening to C4G's podcast regarding sales enrichment as we look at the leaders and the influencers in our industry, the financial service industry. Today, blessed to have a buddy and a longtime affiliate of mine, Christopher Wilks. Chris, how you doing today?
Doing very well. How you doing, John?
Good. Chris, how long have you and I worked together?
Ooh,
Chris is good with all these dates and stuff. I'm sloppy with them.
August 28, 1998, actually.
Look at that. August 28th, you know.
Yeah.
The day you regret, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. Shh.
So Chris brings a very unique perspective to the industry. When Chris and I first met, Chris was, we hired Chris at Hancock, and Chris has been with me all through the journey of Regal and everything. But Chris became a long-term care specialist for us. So everybody that we started at Hancock learned that particular product line, and then we sought out people that needed solutions. You need our product for solutions in their lives. We do things a little differently now. We're more advisors, but I want to sort of take a little bit of that journey because I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. Chris, explain how you first came and how we started working to talk about the old days, and only good stuff. Don't put any of the bad stuff.
Tempting. It's going to sound really weird. I actually answered a newspaper article of all things back in May of 1998. I worked for a division of Bank of America Housing. In those days, I was on the commercial lending side. Pretty much a chimp could do my job. I was just going through manufactured homes and assessing damages that individuals did while they were there on the bank's dime. I hated every minute of that and wanted to do something that was a little closer to home. Answered that newspaper ad because my dad's father, so my paternal grandfather, came down with early onset Alzheimer's. My family didn't know what Alzheimer's/dementia was. My family didn't know that it was $52,000 a year. John and I are both originally from the Detroit area. There's a facility over there called Georgia Bloomfield, which is off of Big Beaver Road near Somerset Mall. And
Affluent area and very costly.
Yeah, very, very, very costly. And my grandparents were school teachers, so they didn't have the financial means to cover it.
Now, you grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Grew up in Grand Rapids, so born in Detroit. My parents moved to Kalamazoo. And then in 1979, we came to Grand Rapids. So I make the joke that I'm not Dutch by heritage, but I lived here long enough that I'm Dutch by association.
You can claim it, yeah. Exactly. And so you grew up with your sister. Sister's very accomplished.
Very, very accomplished. University of Michigan grad, Northwestern grad school. So she is a professional recruiter for Aegon Zender.
And your niece just graduated from Stanford?
I have a niece who just graduated from Stanford, Father's Day. Unbelievable. She'll be she's a product engineer for Procter & Gamble. And then her younger sister will be a junior at Northwestern. And then my nephew is going into ninth grade, but he's on the Chicago Fire youth soccer team. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
It's really cool how that European models come to the United States for developing soccer players. It's really pretty cool.
And from a guy who was never into the true football and stuff, it's been really interesting and a cool journey.
You went to Western?
Went to Western Michigan University, kind of did a circuitous route. I was a baseball player in high school. I had aspirations of playing ball like everybody else that plays, and I wanted to play at Texas or Florida. And I remember I was talking to a recruiter at Texas, and he said, "Son, can you hit the ball over that fence 20 times a year?" And I'm like, "Well, no, but I'm fast, and I can hit for average. I can steal bases." He's like, "No, I don't think you heard me. Can you hit the ball over that fence consistently 20 times or more?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "Then we ain't got a place for you." And then my dad had read an article that Central Florida had a program that if you had maintained a 3.5 or greater, they actually paid for your grad school.
Oh, okay.
And so I was going to go down to Central Florida, wanted to be a physician. So I was a biomedical science major. And ironically of all ironies is that with baseball, it's a spring sport, but a lot of the post season is played in the late spring, early summer, actually after you graduate from high school. So my high school went to the state championship, and we lost on an error.
Did you make the air?
No.
Well, good. That'd have been really embarrassing after I asked that question.
Shortstop decided on a double play ball, throw the ball out into right field. We lost 5-3. And I baseball was more than a game. And I told my dad that if it was ever more than a game, I'd stop playing. and I sat in center field, pouted, and I didn't do what you're supposed to do, and that's be a good steward. Go up, shake the other guy's hand. Win, lose, or draw. I was pouting. I was upset. Because I had to win, and so I decided I wasn't going to play baseball. And so my dad said, "Well, if you ain't playing baseball, then I'm not spending out-of-state tuition." And I ended up coming and ended up going to Western because it was home, because I lived in Kalamazoo for 5 years prior. So
I've always really respected your mom and dad, and I've known them now for a long time. What are your thoughts about how your parents raised you? 'Cause I think they're exemplary people.
Unbelievable story. I mean, I do not have that poor story. Do not have that I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. Just the opposite. My folks do. My mom, she grew up very, very poor, inner city of Detroit. And if you know where Wyoming and Finkel is, that's a
tough neighborhood. It was tough back when I was a kid, and it's tough now still. It's been tough.
It's been tough. And she grew up very, very poor. Mom stayed at home. She was one of 7. My grandfather, he, like a lot of people in the Detroit area, UAW worker, worked for Ford and GM. Unfortunately, made a couple of poor life choices and decided that it was more fun to hang out with his buddies than to be there for his kids. And so she grew up a lot harder than she needed to, but very smart, very, 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 very self-motivated. My dad, he grew up with a fantastic family, a very, very bright guy, double promoted twice in school. So, he actually skipped.
Yeah, both your parents are very bright people.
Dad skipped, I think, first grade and part of 9th grade or something like that. Graduated at 17. Was originally going to go to UCLA. He wanted to be an attorney, actually. Was going to go to UCLA. His parents wouldn't let him go out of state, so he decided to go to Western because that's the furthest west that he could go, and his mom and dad still pay for part of his education. Folks met on the bowling team in high school, of all things. John, you're from the Detroit area again. There's a school. They went to Detroit Cast Tech, which
it's famous now.
It is.
It's famous now. The city of Detroit has sort of, and a lot of metro areas have done this, have sort of pooled talent, and they take the really brighter and a lot of the really big time athletes. If you follow the NFL, there's a ton of players that have come through Cast Tech recently, and that used to be the hood. Yeah. And you go down there now, it is a beautiful facility. They've done it right in the regentrification, but that used to be the cast quarters. Cast quarters where you used to go get murdered in Detroit, and now you see young girls running in Lululemon down the street in the middle of the day. It's just changed with the Red Wings coming down there and all that, and then the casinos and everything. So that's pretty cool. So you since I've known you, you've gotten married. You've got a wonderful, love your wife.
22 years. I don't know why she still says yes.
We don't either.
Yep. I think I've kind of duped her into thinking that even though you're from Puerto Rico and technically a U.S. citizen, that if she divorces me or what have you, that she get deported.
Yeah, you might want to hang that over. Exactly. She could do a lot better than you.
Oh yeah.
You got 3 wonderful daughters.
3 daughters, twins plus 1, as we call it. 18 and 16, getting ready to go to college. So that's going to be a new chapter in our lives. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and one of the things, Chris, that I've always admired, I think anybody here that works with you would say, you and Lorelli have sort of taken your mom and dad's tradition of being phenomenal parents. Your children are remarkable. They're just phenomenal people. They're good citizens. They're polite. And I've seen you ride them like a pony at the fair. When they were little and they weren't doing things right, that you and Lorelli were very corrective and taught them the right way of doing things. And you've raised wonderful people. I mean, wonderful people.
Thank you. It starts from my parents. And I had a great model. My folks are getting ready to celebrate their 50th anniversary, been together for 52 years. And, to see what they've done and what they've accomplished as young parents, and then, raising my sister and I, and then, really raising their grandkids. Yeah. We have the model. And so, you have 2 choices. You can either follow the model and move forward, or you can, do something different. And we chose to follow the model.
What people that know are close to you know, and what you exhibit every day, is really what I want to talk about on this podcast. And one of the things we haven't touched is your commitment to the martial arts. Yes. And listening to your intro and talking about baseball and how competitive you are, You are a very, very humble person. And what you've accomplished in the martial arts, how many times have you won the state championship in Michigan?
I've been fortunate. I've won 13 state titles.
Only 13?
Only 13.
How old are you now, Chris?
49.
So you're a lazy ass. You've been taking it off. 13 out of 49. That isn't good, Wilks. That isn't good. And you've represented the United States?
I've represented the United States. I've been very, very fortunate that through an unfortunate incident, I was able to represent the United States at the Goodwill Games. That started in 1998. That's actually right when I met you. I ended up tearing my shoulder in February of 98. I ended up having shoulder surgery, as you know, in December of 98. So I couldn't actually.
That's my claim to fame against you is when we used to have a flag football league and I was a lot lighter and quicker then. And so Wilks covered me as a defensive back and I'd always chip his shoulder a little bit. And they're like, why are you doing that? I'm like, because he's a better athlete. I'm cheating. I'm chipping his shoulder so I can catch the ball. So yeah, we used to have some great things back in the day. But let's talk a little bit about and in preparing for this, there's some things that I learned about you that I didn't know. I know you've been in martial arts, I would have said, for over 30 years. Yep. It's 32 years.
32 years this September. Yep.
And you started with judo, and then you have this, I can't even pronounce it.
It's a Korean art. It's called Tung Sudo Mudukwan. So
it sounds like a combination plate. No disrespect at a Chinese restaurant.
Yeah, just make sure you get the tea with the side.
So it's you've done that for 7 years,
correct?
And then Shotokan for 24.
That is correct. So Tung Sudo is a Korean art. If you know anything about the Hadan warriors were the Korean version of the samurai.
Okay.
And so if you are, especially right now with the Olympics going on, if you see the Taekwondo and stuff, the reason why Taekwondo kicks is that the Japanese used to go over to Korea and kind of beat them up all the time, where the Mongols would come over and beat up the Koreans.
If you haven't read that part of the world history, it's brutal.
Oh, horrible. So the Koreans learned how to kick so they can knock people off a horseback. And so that's why they have the kicking. So Tung Sudo is a kind of a little bit of the kicking art of Taekwondo, and then it has the punching art, if you will, of Shotokan. So, and that's where I got my first black belt, was in Tung Sudo. And then we switched over to Shotokan a little more than 24 years ago. And that would be the traditional Japanese imperial art, if you will.
So you live, you're a religious man.
Very much so.
You're a gentleman. You carry a lot of grace with you, a lot of humility. And I know this because I've talked to you about it over the years. You live by a code. And I always tease you because I never can pronounce it. And it's Bushido, right?
Yeah, Bushido.
Bushido. Okay, thank you for the correction. And that has 8 different parts to it, correct?
Correct.
And you use those as sort of a filter on how to run your life. You lose it almost like we'll go back to your mom and dad. They met at the bowling team. They're sort of guardrails for gutter balls, right?
For gutter balls.
So they keep you on track mentally with where you want. So you've got your religion, you've got your own personal traits and character, but you use this Bushido code as a way to keep you aligned, right?
Correct. And not going through all 8, but the basic premise is just like religion. Just be a good person. And if you're a good person, life will be good. If you're a bad person, life will be bad. It's tough. And one of the things that I get from a lot of my buddies is like, well, can't you just beat this person up? And I'm like, well, that's not what you're supposed to do. The idea is to love one another. Christ taught us that.
Chris, I've been in a couple tense situations with you, and I won't talk about them specifically, but you are the calm in the storm. And I've seen you talk people out of getting hurt. That we've been in situations where people have approached you and been the aggressor, and you're like, I just want to explain this to you. This is what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. I don't want to do this. And I've seen you stick up for people that were weaker, that were being bullied, and you stepped in the line. And that's one of the things I think I admire about you is your character. And we're going to cover this before we break here, but I want to go through the 8 things, and we don't have to go through them in great detail, but in the Bushido code, it's one is the 8 things. There's justice.
Yes, sir.
Courage. Benevolence. I love that word. Yeah. Or mercy. Benevolence. Yeah. That's a word we should use a lot more in society. Benevolence. Politeness, which you are the consummate gentleman. Honesty, sincerity, that's 5. Honor is 6. Loyalty,
Extreme.
you are extremely loyal. You've been loyal to me for many, many years. Character and self-control, which you epitomize. I mean, if I got to look at a guy who's trying to accomplish this in his life, buddy, you might not have hit the ball out of Texas 20 times, but you've hit it out of life 20 times.
Oh, thank you.
You've done and I mean, this is who you are. And I've never looked at this code. I know you abide by it, but I've never looked at it or read it. And today, doing a little preparation for the conversation today and the podcast, I looked into it and I'm like, this is how I would define you.
Oh, thank you. It's the best part about the code for me is it's easy to deviate if you don't do it. So if
One more time.
It's easy to deviate from it. For example, do I know how to hit people? Yes. Do I know how to hurt people? Yes. And do people, we all drive and somebody cuts you off and the first thing you want to do is, tell them how bad they are and da-da-da-da-da. So it's easy to deviate from the code unless you do it. And so if you do it, then you think, maybe that guy's just having the worst day of his life. Maybe he lost a job. Maybe, he found out that he had cancer. Maybe this, that, and the other. Or maybe, just maybe, he might be a lunatic. And, one of the other things that's not in the Bushido code, but one of the things that we tell our students all the time is that if mama bird dies, baby bird dies. And so everything that I do has to be so I go home. So, I don't want my kids to grow up without a father. So I'm not going to say something that's going to potentially put me in a position where I don't come home.
Yeah, you and I have often joked, because I was in the combat arts, not as accomplished as you, but, you can't outpunch a bullet.
Nope. I don't care how fast you are.
Unless you're a Marvel comic guy, you can't dodge them either.
Can't dodge a bullet. And words can be almost as bad as bullets, because in today's litigious society, you say something to the wrong person, they get your license plate. There's cameras everywhere. You're going to get in trouble. So you try.
All right, so we're going to come to a break here. Sure. And what I want to do on the other side of the break, if you permit me, is to look at how this code relates to financial services.
Sounds fantastic.
And how you apply that. Because even though the principles are simple, the application is incredibly complex because of all the things we have to do as advisors. And so I want to sort of, the next second half of the podcast, now that we've talked about who you are and how special you are, is talk about how you apply that and the complexity of that.
Sounds great.
Fair enough?
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. And we'll see you on the other side of this break with Christopher T. Wilks. And T is short for Terrence, which is his father's name. And I call his dad Big T.
Big T.
Big T and Little J is his mom. So we'll be back on the other side with Chris talking about the code and how he uses this code of honor to help serve his clients and serve the community as a whole. Well, thank you for joining us on the other side of this break. As I said, we've got Christopher Wilks. Chris has been a longtime affiliate of Regal and a personal friend of mine. He's seen me raise my kids. I've seen him raise his kids. He's probably done a better job raising his kids than my kids. But
don't ask me that today.
So, Chris, I want to talk about, on the other side of the break, we were talking about the code in which you live by. And I want you to explain that. I mean, we talked a little bit about the 8 parts that, justice, courage, mercy, politeness, honesty, honor, loyalty, and character or self-control. Those are the 8. How do you apply it to financial services?
Well, when everybody enters our business, we talk about that elevator pitch. What is your elevator pitch? And, when I originally got in the business, as you said earlier, I was the long-term care gentleman, and that has morphed over the last 26 years now.
Oh, and we had some tough, brutal training sessions, didn't we?
Oh, yeah, those old fast start.
I ran it like a military operation.
7:55, we were starting role-playing at 8:15 and then appointments at 9:00. The elevator pitch now has been shortened, and I just tell people that I'm a professional problem solver that happens to use insurance and investments to solve the problems. And we use this code, if you will, to solve the problems. You had said something a long time ago that people buy insurance because they either love somebody or they owe somebody. And
that's true. The bank requires you, or you love your family, you love your business, you love somebody, you owe somebody.
Love somebody or owe somebody. Well, in our business, as you know, we can manipulate premium cost. We can do things that are in our best interest, not necessarily in the client's best interest. We can do things in the firm's best interest. When I say the firm, the product companies that we're working with, not always in the client's best interest, and then try to justify it. And you can't justify things that are unjustifiable. And that's part of the code. So,
Well, it's tough. A lot of times you can look at a product and, it solves the need, but this one's cheaper. The other product's cheaper. Or there's always different ways of looking at it. And you can become delusional.
Oh, easily.
Very easy and get off track. I mean, I've got, luckily I've got guys like you and Brian around that when I'm looking at it, I'm like, here's a client solution. I think this will work, but does he really need this product? Does he really, because my comp might be higher, things like that. And I've got great people around here that I can just sort of check myself. If you're an independent, you're listening to this right now and you've got an assistant, right? You got some tough quandaries at times.
Yeah. And then the other part of that is that sometimes it's also okay to get paid.
Oh, most definitely.
And I think that's part of the honor. Part of it is that if you're doing something honorable, it's okay to get paid because the samurai, and if you will, the Bushido code, was there for the samurai. You honored the state, you honored the country, you honored the shogun for whom that you were employed by. But then your assistants, lackeys, they honored you by taking care of you. So it's not a problem to get paid, but just making sure that you're getting paid with what you're worth and or what you're actually given to the client.
Well, one of the things I like about this is we go down rabbit holes, right?
Oh,
so I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here. So when we're looking at the eighth portion of the code, it's character or self-control. How do you handle, you go into a household, you work with a client, or go into business, whatever it is, and you see the work of another advisor, and it's shabby at best, if not downright poor. How do you handle that? Because, self-control, right?
Sure.
I know you're competitive. You want to say, this guy, this is a bum. He did a terrible job, but you're too polished and polite and kind to do that. So how do you handle that? I think it's a great lesson for people. You don't want to tell somebody their baby's ugly, but man, your baby's ugly.
It's like sometimes there is such thing as an ugly baby. Well, years and years ago, when I say years ago, almost 25 years ago, you and at that time your business partner said something to me that has stuck, and that is, there's a reason why you're there. And if somebody brings you in, either they're kind of questioning, the person, they're questioning what they have, or they need affirmation of what they have. If you see work that is shoddy, if you see work that is at best poor, it's easy to be kind and then redirect. And I don't know if
that's really wise. Kind and redirect is the answer, right?
Yeah. You don't have to bash, because if you bash, then they're going to probably think, well, this guy's just trying to do something so that he can take over stuff. And you don't want to blow sunshine up somebody's rear end and tell them that's the greatest thing since sliced bread when it's not. But if you're kind and then redirect, it tends to get you further. And sometimes it gets you further even if you don't do something, because they can tell that you're not in it for you, you're in it to help them.
Yeah, I've watched you develop and stuff, and you're very good at what you do, and you're contrarian to what everything we taught regarding, a sales process and keeping things on track. You move with glacier swiftness. Yeah. Chris, you'll I swear you spend 20 hours with somebody, and you just educate. But that's why you don't have any compliance issues. You don't have, but you really are very slow. You measure 3 times and cut once.
Yeah. And then measure.
And I'm teasing you a little bit about.
No,
I'm teasing you a little bit about. But that's who you are, and that's you're being authentic. And I think people can see that, and that you're not pressing them. You never. I would never. I would say you're very effective at what you do. But if someone said, "Is Wilks a hard closer?" I would say probably in a martial arts match.
Yeah,
but not in the business.
No,
Wilks doesn't close. No. He just sort of wears everybody out, and you just apply all this logic and kindness, and your style is just to be so giving that they're like, why wouldn't I do business with this guy? He's done all the work. I like him. Let's just do it. I think that's sort of what happened. I think you just wear them down with kindness and goodness and knowledge.
years ago,
which just sounds so bizarre. It's
when I started in this business, you had told me, you need to close people 8 times. That you need to close them 8 times. It wasn't necessary you have to hard close them 8 times.
no, not at all.
And I think that is something that is the proverbial used car salesman, furniture salesman / appliance salesman.
What's it? A Glengarry Glen Ross, right? Yeah. No, you need to give them the opportunity. Right. And I would think that a lot of things that we taught years ago have softened and moved more to the middle.
Yeah, I would say.
I don't know if it's because we're getting older, but I think it's just the development. I think it's actually the education of the American public is alluded to that.
You don't have to bring in 17 proposals because somebody has a phone. They have an iPad. They have a computer. They can look up the stuff. They need you. And if you are there and they understand that you're going to be there, not just today, but down the road.
I tell everybody this now, especially younger reps. Information, being independent, you used to have the problem with getting information.
Oh, yeah.
Now, we all have iPhones or whatever phone you're using. You get more information on your phone than you can ever consume. And information is cheap now, and it's not worth anything.
Yep.
It's how you apply that information to make it knowledge, and then to wisdom is the next level, is what sets you apart. And your value proposition for a client should be the application of information for their benefit.
Yeah, hands down. I teach my kids, what is wisdom? It's age plus experience. And the experience part should teach you that people don't want to be sold. And, my biggest fear is that a client's going to tell a regulator, he sold this to me. I want it to be, that guy, he talked to me for 7,000 hours about something. They may not know everything, but it won't be because he sold it to me. It's because, we fulfilled a need at the time. And do the needs change? Yeah. In 26 years, things change. But it won't be because they're sold. And that's why I don't try to hard sell anybody. It's because I don't want that feeling. And I don't like that feeling myself. And, kind of going back to our earlier, talk about religion, it's kind of like that do unto others as you'd have others do unto you. I don't want somebody to pressure me into something, so I won't do that to them.
No, fair enough. I mean, that's, it's another example of you living by a code, right?
Yeah, exactly. Probably the best one out there. So, that guy back a couple thousand years ago, he had something going on.
Yeah, he had something figured out. Let's talk. What has been your most difficult thing of overcoming in the industry?
Initially, it was the perception that a young gentleman in conservative West Michigan that didn't have the same skin tone as the majority of the individuals could do this business. I mean, plain and simple, that was the hardest part. And then it was the perception of knowledge. How can you compete with somebody who's been in the business for 40 years? Because you just don't have the knowledge base. Now, I would say the hardest thing to deal with is complacency, on my part. Sometimes, you're like, oh, well, things are good. I've got a family. You're kind of, along this road, you don't always want, to take a left or take a right or, certainly go backwards and stuff. So you just kind of ho hum, another year goes by, ho hum,
yeah.
Another year goes by. The hardest thing from a client standpoint, or an acquisition of a client standpoint is for them to see you as the person they can see you with for 10, 15 years. And so, especially if they had a relationship with someone for 10 or 15 years. And so now you're trying to break down those doors.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably the hardest thing now is the complacency. And
if you could change something in the industry, what would it change?
And
don't say leadership at Regal.
By far, if I could change one thing, is the perception that we only work with people that have gazillions of dollars. Because, I don't know about you, John, but often when you tell people what you do, it seems like a lot of the words that, oh, you'd never work with me because I don't have millions of dollars. And I kind of make the joke that, the clients that we have that have millions of dollars, our job is to kind of not mess it up.
Yeah, no, it's a different.
And so I wish that perception was that, it, will help anyone. Certainly, does it, pat our ego? a little bit. If you have a client with a portfolio that has a couple of commas in it, of course it does. But that perception that we will only help those who really don't need the help, I wish that wasn't there, because I think we failed a little bit in the industry.
Well, I think that comes back to our educational system, right? That we don't teach basic financial principles.
Yeah.
And so here you have very, very bright people that are growing up ignorant about a subject matter. Mm-hmm. And they really, since they have no understanding of it, it's hard for someone to approach them because nobody wants to feel like they're inadequate. And then it just sort of snowballs, and the client. How do you think you think client behavior has changed in the last 26 years?
I do, good and bad. And as I'm thinking about your question, I might modify that to, I think people have needed a little more accountability. And when I say that is that when I first started in the business, there were far more people that had pensions, and somebody was going to take care of them. And I think people realized that, no, I'm supposed to take care of myself. So from your question of what has changed, I would say that I need to take care of me, whether that is a defined contribution plan versus a defined benefit plan, or if it's I need to get my stuff in order. When I first started in the business, I would say less than 10% of our clients had wills and trust. It's like, oh, well, if I die, they'll figure it out. That's probably about 35% now. Still not where it needs to be.
Yeah.
But it's a lot better.
It reminds me, when you're saying that, it reminds me of I fly back and forth from Michigan to Tampa, and I'm always flying for events and stuff. And they always, the airplane talk, put on your own mask first. Before you put on the other, because you got to, right? And people are starting to help themselves a little bit more. Maybe that's because the information that's readily available, but it's the application of it that is often flawed, and that's why we're needed. And I think we'll be needed for several decades.
AI, in my opinion, can't do our job. Can AI tell somebody, well, based off of your age and based off of how much you save, this is where you should be? Yeah, I mean, we could punch a number into a financial calculator that we've had for years and stuff and do that. But as far as knowing the nuances, they're not gonna. AI doesn't know the nuances. AI is not going to understand. You go into your son's lacrosse camp, and then the coach saying, "Oh, guess what? We switched over to Under Armour shoes, and now it's $235 that you weren't expecting to pay because you just bought them a set of Nikes that you can't take back." Or in my case, the gymnastics teacher's like, "Oh, we changed our leotard 57 times and and stuff." So that's going to be a big change.
Let's have here at the end of the podcast here. What's your oddest client appointment?
I will never forget this. I was actually with your father, and I walked up to the door, and the young lady, she had a very thick Eastern European accent. And she opened the door. Actually, backtrack a little bit. She had called our office when we were still with the old John Hancock office, and she had some questions on a life insurance policy. I was sent out, because I knew the contract a little bit better than some of the other agents in the office. And she opened up her door, and she's like, "Oh, no, not you, not you." And after I had left, she called, spoke to our then secretary, Kathy. Kathy had given you the information about how this lady called, and she, told you that she was not expecting that I would come to her door. And you, not so politely, but politely told her that you sent Chris there for a reason, and that I could handle her need. And if she could not accept the fact that I was who I was, then she probably should call the other John Hancock office in our town.
I forgot all about that.
and we fired her right there. And what that did is it showed me that there were people that had my back, back then. It showed me that if you spend the time and you spend the effort, and people see that you spend the time and effort, that they want to have your back and stuff. So that by far was
I forgot all about
most
that.
difficult.
Look at this, Chris. I was woke. I was woke 26 years ago and didn't even know it. Now you do the right thing, and I would always, I love and respect you, and I would always have you in my foxhole.
No, I
There's no
appreciate it.
doubt in my mind. So one last question.
Sure.
And this is a heavy one.
Okay.
I always sort of do this at the end of the podcast. I ask a heavy question. What's the meaning of life for you?
Oh,
See, it wouldn't be easy.
that's changed. I mean, if you asked me that question when I was 18 years old, it was, to be a professional baseball player, have a pretty wife, a dog, or what have you. If you ask me that question,
We got a pretty wife.
I do have a pretty wife. If you ask me that question at 30, it was, I was a guy who had, twin daughters who were born premature that spent,
Yeah, you had a
month and
tough
half.
go. You guys just had a tough go of it.
That first couple of years was tough. And just making sure that those little faces could survive. I mean, and
Literally.
that's the truth. Now that they're 18 and what have you, the meaning of life for me is making sure that I'm a good dad. First and foremost, you can be. I can't remember who quoted the saying, but it's like in life you can be good, better, and best, and you have to be the best at being a parent. So that's number one. It has to be.
I wish more people thought the way you do.
And so, for me now, it's be the best dad that I can be. That's number one. Be a better person each and every day, and then be a good steward of the little things. You don't have to be the best at the little things, but just, be a good steward of the little things. And if you do that, then you'll be better. And if you do the better, you'll be the best. And ultimately, if I might joke around with my daughters, I said, when dad's dead, rotten, and forgotten, if you spend $100,000 in therapy, it's not going to be because I wasn't there. It's not because I didn't love you. It's because, we did too much, or, we were at functions, or, we did this, that, and the other. So, for me, the meaning of life is being there for the lives that you decided to bring into this earth, because it's my responsibility for them. It's not everyone else's.
That's phenomenal, Chris. I'm so glad I asked you that question, and what a response. Have you seen me grow and through the years and stuff? I've sort of taken what you said there, and my definition of success now is having adult children that want to spend time with me.
That's huge.
My kids are going to be 29, 27. You've known them since they were in diapers.
Yeah, Trey was 18 months old.
Yeah, and you've seen me ride them like ponies around the building here, and stay after them. You've seen them go through, the private schools and colleges, and now they're professionals. And we have a family night, and they want to come over to see mom and dad. It's pretty cool.
It is, especially since what's the first thing that we hear? I want to thank my mom. And, I know that there's two gentlemen on this podcast right now, but it should be, I want to thank my mom, but I'm glad dad was around. And you don't hear that enough. So it's great that your kids want to spend time with dad.
Especially, we talked a little bit about being African American.
Yeah.
You see the absence of fathers, and it's crushing the community.
It's horrible. It's deplorable.
It's now affecting, it's affecting every walk of life now, and it's a shame because it's so easily fixed. It's just taking time with somebody and showing them you care and you love them, and so many of these problems would go away. And then a firm hand, a little discipline, right? Discipline's the greatest form of love, and just saying, hey, we don't do that this way. We don't do it like that in this household. Man, we'd solve a lot of problems, wouldn't we?
I joke around all the time. Testosterone's a wonder drug and stuff. Discipline is even better. As long as where the guardrails are, kind of going back to that bowling analogy and stuff, you'll do well. I mean, your cars today, now cars have sensors that they can read the road and what have you. And what does it do? It keeps you in the middle of the lane. And that's what discipline does. It keeps you in the middle. It doesn't let you go too far to the left, doesn't let you go too far to the right, so you don't hurt yourself. And the fact that your kids want to spend time with dad, that's huge. I hear often in my client meetings, which to also answer your question, what has been one of the biggest things that has changed? The family dynamic has changed, and not necessarily for the better.
No, I think it's worse. I think the family dynamic is worse. It's much more divided.
Yes,
it's separated is another word I would use. It's not connected. So Deborah and I were doing this one thing, and we're running a little out of time here, but we're doing a family night. So both my kids are in Tampa, and their significant others are coming over, and we're doing a family function. So just last month, your kids would love this. There is a place about an hour south of Tampa, and we went fossil hunting.
Oh,
So they took us out in the middle of this. They put us in a river, a shallow river, and we, like you pan for gold. We were dumping sand in and panning. We all did it individually, and we had a little competition on how many shark teeth we could find and all this.
Arrowheads.
And I'm watching my daughter and my son's girlfriend, who are both in the medical field. Their science nerd is coming out.
Okay.
They are in seventh heaven, out there, and Trey and I are just being competitive that I can get more than him. We don't care about what we were just going to beat each other. That's my son, who you know well. And so those events, I thought it was sort of hokey. I've had 3 separate emails or texts in our family text chat how cool that was and what are we going to do next. So now I've got to start planning a monthly event where we can get together and just slow down. And, we did the opening of the Olympics was another thing we did. And so I'm focusing that because I think that's important.
It is. And it's time well spent. I mean, it's so easy just to, give somebody a phone, give somebody an iPad, take somebody to a movies, 2-3 hours I spent time. Did you? And that's one of the things that my wife, and she's far better at it than I am. I try to spend as much time with the girls, but she's in it. Yeah. And, we try to remember to be in it. And
I think you've done a phenomenal job. And when your girls walk in here, they're young ladies. They're world citizens. They're quality people. Right. I mean, if my son brought one of those girls home, I'd be like, that's a keeper.
Well, you can have them. They're getting ready to get really expensive. No.
Hey, I paid for IMG, Marquette University, Florida, University of Detroit, Michigan State, and I think soon to be, Trey, you remember him for 18 months. He is graduating this week with his master's degree from Michigan State.
Trey, congrats.
In strategic leadership, and it looks like he'll be going to Liberty in the fall for his doctorate in strategic leadership. So another tuition bill.
Well, you know what? If you want to throw on 2 more, because I have double tuition bills and
if
stuff.
you would have done it 2 years ago, I wouldn't have noticed.
You
would have slid it in. I wouldn't. I was just writing checks. So again, Chris, as we conclude here, I really appreciate you doing this and sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for inviting me.
Appreciate all your friendship over the years. And, you and I still have a long runway yet. Even though we're getting old. And, I really appreciate everything you've done for my family, the firm, and who you are.
Well, thank you, John. And it's been a fantastic journey. And, I didn't lead the podcast with, but I'll certainly end it here. One of the reasons why the Bushido code means so much to me, and it's the 7th thing that you went through there, and it's loyalty. And years and years ago, when I applied, with that newspaper article, I had an interview with a company by the name of Solomon Smith Barney. And I had an 8.5-hour interview with Solomon Smith Barney.
I mean, everything you do is long.
Yeah. and they flew some guy up and blah, 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 blah. And, at the end of the interview, the gentleman, he looked me in the eye and he said, I just don't see a 23-year-old guy, African-American guy, being able to talk to the majority of our clients who are going to be in their 50s, who's going to have a net worth at that time of over $250,000, probably adjusted for inflation. It's probably about $750,000 now. I just don't see it. And basically said, sorry, but you're not going to get the job. At the end of the interview, he asked me, he's like, I bet you want to kick my butt, as he saw my resume and saw that I was on the U.S. team. I'm like, no, I'd like to think that, my degree in economics and, the person who I am would get me the job, not because I can kick your butt. And the lady that was validating my parking, she said, you know what, that was the best answer you gave in the last 8.5 hours. It wasn't, it had nothing to do with work. It just had something to do with your character. Fast forward a couple of days, and I interviewed with you and your business partner, then Larry, and I got the job because you looked down at my resume and said, hey, you're a martial artist. I know you'll work. And that was the end of it. It wasn't who you are. It wasn't the color of your skin. It wasn't anything else. It was, if you can do this, I know you'll work. And that's meant a lot. And again, looking at that code, loyalty goes both ways. So somebody was loyal enough to put me in a position. So it's easy for me to be loyal 26 years later, pardon me.
It's been a long road, man.
It's been a long time.
We still got tread on the tires, though.
Yeah, exactly.
My hairline is completely gone.
Oh, yeah, mine's racing.
And yours is racing to catch it. So we still got some tread on the tires. But again, thank you, Chris.
You're welcome.
Thank you for everything you've done for the firm and again, my family and everything. So
you're more than welcome. Thank you.
All right. We'll stay tuned. Next week, we'll have another great episode with another leader in the industry. This was with Chris Wilks, and you can get this on the C4G website, which is Catalyst, the number 4 growth, catalyst4growth.org. catalyst4growth.org. So tune in. You can listen to this episode again and get all the resources that we have available to help you with your practice and help you grow.